Okay, now.
Hello? I don't hear anybody.
Jason, and I can't hear Jason, and I can't hear James. I could hear you, Jerry. Don't worry, folks. When we do this live, we'll work it out. It seems like they can hear me.
I'm talking.
Man,
yes,
Jason looks really good.
I can see that you guys are talking.
Jason's
but
camera's like really
I
good.
can't hear anything. So
yeah.
Is
Jason a pilot? Is Jason a pilot?
My end again?
Excuse me.
Oh wait, I hear him.
So, hey, Jerry, can you hear me?
I can hear you though, Matt.
This is very interesting. Where's Blackberry? Hive Indicator says.
She's in her coop.
Yeah, we can't hear each other, but they can hear us. That's awesome. That's going to be a super interesting interview. So what we're going to do, everybody, is...
Wait, I can hear Matt.
We here are going to talk to each other, but you have to tell them what we said. Right? So I'm going to stop. I'm going to talk, and then they're going to tell me... They're going to tell you what I said, and then you're going to talk, and chat's going to tell me what you said. This is super cool. So I'm going to use this opportunity, everybody, to take a minute. Since you guys can hear me, apparently chat can hear me.
I can hear Matt.
That's somebody in chat just said, Matt said you're all fired. No, that's not true. The opposite, in fact. So this is the first, and maybe last. No, I'm kidding. This is the first live stream for Arcadia. I'd like to do this at least with the first 3 issues. It depends on, how disruptive this is for our schedule. But we like featuring the writers, and I want to feature all the folks at MCDM that worked on this, like Jason and James. And also, we'd like to congratulate Anna. And James says that he can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. You can't hear me?
Yep, I still can't hear them. I'm just going to keep talking. So we would like to do this for every issue. We really want to focus on the writers because they're the authors of this stuff. Okay, so it's working so far, Jerry. Wait. Somebody say something.
Hello, how's it going?
I hear you guys.
Hi,
but
yay!
But no, can chat hear us? That would be so funny if we could hear each other and now chat can't hear us. That would be awesome. Okay, everybody says that we're good. So Arcadia is our first. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Arcadia is our first. We gotta hurry because we've got a schedule. We've got four authors standing by for you, each of them eager to talk to you folks, and we are eager to interview them. So I'm going to try to keep it short. Arcadia is just came out. You can get it on our Patreon or on our store. There should be links in chat. It is our monthly ? Magazine for 5th edition content for players and dungeon masters. The first issue just came out. It's got 4 articles in it, and we're going to talk to the authors today. But before we do that, before we do what we're about to do, I just want to give a shout out to both Anna and Lars, who are the unsung heroes of Arcadia. They busted their ass. Like, Lars has done very little in the past 4 months except work on Arcadia and Kingdoms and Warfare testing. So he was leading the charge for getting the editing and the layout done and all that stuff. So it's incredibly useful for us to have this team of both creators and producers who can support the process we're going through. And we want, before we go to the authors, each author is going to get like a 20-minute chunk. I'm sure a lot of you folks are going to have questions about other stuff that MCDM does. I encourage you to come by our Twitch channel, Twitch/MCDM, because we do live Q&As there all the time. And I keep people pretty well updated about what's going on at the company. But before we get to all that, let's talk to Jason and James. Jason is kind of the guest of this section. So if you folks have any questions about the art, we want to hear it because we're really proud of the art. Jason, how's it going?
Good. I can't see or hear those questions though.
I will handle that. Don't worry.
Okay.
Actually, you can.
All
I can send you. I can send you a link if you want to see the.
Okay.
If you want to.
I'm afraid to click anything at this point. So.
Well, that's wise. That is wise. Yeah. People want to know about your chicken, obviously.
Yeah. Part of the pandemic project was raising some chickens. We hatched some chickens and we raised seven total from chicks. Two of them turned out to be roosters, so we had to give them to friends because we're not allowed to have those here. But it's been great.
Roosters are illegal.
They're allowed, is what it is.
A bunch of people are asking. This is really interesting. This isn't really a Jason question. It's more of like an Anna/Lars question. But a common question about the art is, will they be able to get art prints? That part was me.
Yeah, I don't know. Some of the artists we work with actually will sell the prints directly, and that was sort of part of their contract. That was something that we gave them free rein to continue doing, including one of our later covers, which I don't want to spoil yet. But
yeah, I know what you mean. The cover of number 3, right?
Well, 2 and 3 actually.
2 and 3, cool.
So, yeah. So I think that's something we're actually okay letting the artists do. Maybe there's some. The answer is sure. I don't know how yet.
Fair enough.
Different avenues.
Because obviously, one of the often when we contract artists, especially the artists that do our covers, right? Because the cover is kind of the premier piece. The deal we have with them is that we get their piece for our stuff, and like we could reprint it in our books if we wanted to, but they get to sell prints on their website. So we'll make sure that if they are available, that you folks get links to buy those things, because that helps us support the artist. Also, how do we? So, Jason, here's a question: how do we source artists? Where do we find?
Well, you know what? You mentioned Anna for Arcadia. Anna did all this work, really. I mean, it came from everywhere. A lot of different members on the team. James contributed to this too. I mean, I looked up some of my own, but Anna put together a huge avenue of resources for us. Looking through artists, posting up artists, kind of gave us some tools to track that well, and even made suggestions. She even wrote up art briefs for several of the pieces in all 3 of the current Arcadia issues we've worked on. So,
what is an art brief?
It's usually what I use to kick off kind of art directions. It's a general description of the art we need for the story, the piece, or the section of the magazine, and sometimes it will include reference photographs, other illustrations, sketches, things like that. So, does that answer the question?
Yes. What?
Okay.
So, is there any part of this process that, in terms of like getting art for this magazine, that is more difficult than any other part?
I think there were parts that were a little more stressful, like the covers. The covers. We had something very specific in mind. You and I, when we first started talking about this, we were reminiscing over these magazines we had right when we were younger from the 80s, Epic and Dragon magazine, and I think there was one piece that we kept looking at from Daniel Horn. It was like a big giant skeleton going after a warrior. She's like drawing her bow. We got like John Berkey stuff and Tim Conrad, and we were inspired by those types of covers, and we wanted to sort of source similar things, and that's not necessarily easy to find these days as far as artists go.
You're right.
But Gustavo, for our first cover, he got us that. So
yeah, people seem to be really happy with the with that first cover. Is there any attempt on our end to create like a style for Arcadia as far as the art goes, or is it kind of the opposite?
It's kind of the I mean, we definitely want it to feel like those magazines that I just referenced, right? Dragon, Epic, this kind of those had this sort of rough conglomerate feel, right? There's a lot of different sources of art and writing and inspirations in those magazines. You can go from one cover with a jet fighter fighting a dragon to the previous image I just described, right?
Great idea.
And that was a lot of fun. As a kid, I was drawn to those, and it made me want to open them up and keep looking through and reading them. We kind of pride ourselves on sourcing different style of artists and Arcadia, we did this thing where we sort of gave them a little bit of free reign too. So from an art direction standpoint, my job wasn't very hard on Arcadia. It was just sort of picking artists, putting them with different art pieces, and telling them to have fun with it.
And it's tough. You mentioned this earlier. It's tough finding artists for covers. Why is that, do you think?
I don't. It's finding the style. A lot of art these days, at least of the avenues that we have for sourcing things, are one, digital, and a lot of the stuff we mentioned have a sort of style quality that comes out of physical painting, right? Using physical medium. Yeah.
Right.
Well, oil and acrylic and markers and pencils and, chalk and charcoal, all those things have kind of a different feel. And some people try to emulate that in Photoshop, but it doesn't always quite feel the same, right?
Right. And so that whole style is now kind of, it's gone, right? That's not how people work anymore. People don't work in those mediums anymore.
Mm-hmm. And there are people that do it, but they're few and far between.
And many of them are like really old, like they're still working, but they're old and they're booked.
Yeah.
James, you're the managing editor of this project.
Yes.
Right. What does that mean for people who don't know? What does the managing editor do?
So what Jason does for art, I basically do for the words in the magazine, right? I am looking for writers, and I am asking writers, what do they want to write? And similar to the way, the artists had a lot of space, we gave our authors kind of a lot of space, right? We kept saying that thing, Matt, that you had said about things being really fucking dope and actionable as far as the content goes. And so that was what we were telling people. And then it was like, so what do you want to make, right? And we got pitches for subclasses and adventures and all kinds of other stuff. And so it was like, well, you want to see that in the D&D world. You're passionate about it. Let's do it. And then what I do then is I help them make that article the best article it can be on that subject, right? But I still want, especially for Arcadia, this was something big that I'm passionate about. It's something big you're passionate about, Matt, preserving that author's voice and making sure that they really own it. So everything that we kind of do is more a suggestion than it is you must do this from a publisher standpoint.
Yeah, that was also, that was a big part of my feedback was always, this is what I think, but it's up to the author because it's their byline, right? So that was when you and I would communicate, it was often about like, well, here's what I think. But it's even, I would even, correct me if I'm wrong, my memory is faulty, but I would tell you, listen, this is what I think, but you don't, if you disagree, then you don't need to communicate that to the authors.
Yeah. I mean, that was said many times. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
People like your Fizz gig from, I believe that's Dark Crystal, correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's from the series that just got canceled. It's the one with the eye patch. So.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So James, give people who don't know some background into how you ended up the managing editor. Like, how did you get the gig?
Sure, yeah. So I was a freelancer for years before I was working with MCDM, and then you did the call for the Player's Guide to Capital. But before that, I had been blogging and I had been podcasting, and I was a freelance television writer-producer. And so I started with a lot of television work because that's where I had been. And then I sort of just slowly shifted more and more into game design that way. And through having a blog and through putting stuff that I had put on my blog, then on the DMs Guild, I started to get freelance gigs. And I think when I approached you, I had worked on 7 different Wizards of the Coast hardcover products. And I was like, hey, Matt, I hear you're great to work with. Like, let's work together. And so, and then from there, I think I annoyed you with recommending people to work on stuff until you said, wow, this guy knows a lot of people. We should hire him to be the managing editor of Arcadia.
Yeah, when you first, before we started on the Player's Guide to Capital, we referred to you as the Ringer because we wanted to we wanted to make sure that we cast a wide net, but we also wanted to make sure that we had at least one person on the team who was super rock solid in terms of knowing 5th edition and the language of 5e and just as prose and stuff like that. What would you say? I'm going to ask the same question to Jason. We got about 15 minutes, folks, before we bring the first author on. So this is the time to ask questions about art, because after that, it's going to be about the articles. What would you say was your first break? Was there a moment where you went from laboring in obscurity to suddenly now you were able to get gigs semi-regularly, James?
Yeah, definitely. So I did some stuff for the Adventurers League, and through that, I was recommended to Chris Perkins for Waterdeep Dragon Heist. And It was after Waterdeep Dragon Heist came out that I was able to really get a lot of work because of that. And honestly, Wizards of the Coast, to their credit, has even gone to touting who they work with more and more. And so hopefully that works out well for other authors too.
Do you remember how many years you were working as a freelancer before you could sort of rely on it to be in that laboring in obscurity period? How long did that last before you felt like you were able to make a living at this?
So for me, it was 3 years before I was doing that, right? And a lot of it was doing, I wrote and produced television commercials. So that's kind of what I was doing for then. And I would say it wasn't until this year, which is 7 years down the line, that I was able to do this time as a freelancer. So it took a long time to get to the full-time game design.
Wow. Yeah, you have to be. That's an important lesson, folks. If you're interested in doing this for a living, you got to keep plugging away at it. It doesn't happen quickly. Jason, for those people in chat who haven't been to our live streams that you and I have done in the past on Twitch, how did you get started as an artist? What was your first professional gig, Jason?
Well, I did some freelance stuff in college, but I think my first full-time real art gig was working for Westwood Studios out of college. Oh, wow. So, yeah, I coming out of high school.
Because there are a lot of young people who don't know.
They're kind of famous for RTS games, the Dune RTS games, Command and Conquer, right? Red Alert. They became EA. They got bought up by EA, and the studio I worked at actually became EA Pacific, and we were working on the Red Alert franchises. Which was kind of a cool transition because I went to school looking to get into movies through CGI, through 3D art, but I kind of got reintroduced to video games while I was in college and got sort of sucked up into them. And when I came out of college, I didn't even consider applying to movie studios or movie special effects houses. I just shotgunned demo reels to video game companies, and Westwood picked me up. And I moved out here from the East Coast.
And how long was it before applying at Westwood to the point where we met at Turtle Rock?
Well, I don't know. That was a long time. It was a long time.
Yeah, these things don't. My point is just that these things don't happen overnight. They take a lot of work.
6 years, 7 years. Yeah. It's been a while.
Do you plan, folks in chat are asking, is there any Jason art in Arcadia? And I already know the answer, so I'm going to follow up already with, will there be any Jason art in future issues?
Yes. In the next getting there'll be some Jason art, and then hopefully some more. That. So, as well, we're getting a lot of process figured out. Is starting to go more smoothly. We brought Nick on to help with art management, so I should be able to do more art here very soon. So
good. Yeah. What's that tension like? How much of, because you're hired to be the art director, right? Meaning source and manage artists. What's the tension there between how much of Jason wants to draw and how much of Jason actually enjoys managing artists?
Yeah, they're both very enjoyable. As far as an 8-hour day goes, it's hard to do both sometimes. It's very different kind of mindsets, and there's a lot of switching gears. When you're managing different types of art pieces, it's hard to think about your own. You can't really get in the groove. You can get in the groove with the art direction, and it's satisfying and it's fun, and it feels very collaborative working with different artists. You give them idea, they come back with sketches, they've incorporated their own ideas or their own interpretation of your brief or your input, and there's a lot of back and forth, and it's a lot of fun, and then you end up with cool art at the end of it.
I'll tell you that having done that job as a non-artist, as one of the first things I did in the industry when I worked for Last Unicorn Games, watching you work with the artist, like, it's incredibly powerful for the artist to submit a sketch saying, this is what I was thinking, and then have you draw over it and be like, no, like this, or try this. Right, because that maybe it takes you half an hour to do that, but that might save hours of back and forth and iteration. The fact that you can just go, no, how about like this? So that's sometimes super cool.
Yeah, sometimes showing's a lot faster than telling. Yeah.
Dalton Weiss asks, how important is it for a portfolio sample to demonstrate an individual unique style versus matching the expectations of the audience for something like Arcadia? Like, what do you look for? How do you know? This kind of dovetails into other questions we got in Super Chat. Like, how do you know that when an artist is right for Arcadia?
That's a good question. As far as style goes, Arcadia is kind of this melting pot of styles. So there's a larger variety that we could be inspired by, but it's still very subjective. It's going to be myself or other team members saying, we really like this person's art, can we get them to do something in the magazine? And that's basically the gist of that.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of us being excited and saying, Jason, talk to this person, see if they'll work with us.
And that's really all it is, as far as Arcadia goes. For a professional portfolio, if there's a place you want to work at and they have a strong style or established style, I highly suggest trying to emulate that style.
Sure.
And, that has pros and cons, because, if you don't get that gig right away, you want to make sure that your portfolio, then it can still apply to other people's styles. So, it's good to have a little bit of a mix.
On what the artist wants. So are you like do you really want to work for this one company that has a unique style? You need to show them that you can do it, or you just want to shop yourself around. We got a question for James in chat. Once we knew what Arcadia was going to be, what would you say was the biggest challenge for you as a managing editor?
That's a great question. I think it's for me, the biggest challenge was finding what made each article special and really bringing that out, right? And I think, Matt, you and I had a really good conversation in the beginning about a bunch of the articles where you were like, but what we need to do is latch on to what's useful, but also what's really cool about this. And I think one of the things you said that has been a guiding star for me since is, you don't care if there is another version of X out there, as long as our version of X is awesome and the most awesome we can make it. And I think that has really helped me free up the chains. And that was like a big moment for me where it was like, oh yeah, if it's not in the core rules, or even if it is in the core rules, and it's something we think that we could do better, like, let's go for it, let's try it, the sky is really the limit. And so that's a challenge, right? Because that's like a big blue open sky. But then working with the individual authors to find out what they're passionate about and what they really want to bring to the game is really exciting. And so that's been the best part of it for me. And the most challenging thing to overcome is like, there are so many possibilities. Let's zero in on one thing about this article. Yeah.
Right. How to make, because we only have a limited, space, right? Where the whole thing's only 40 pages. So each article has to hyper focus on doing what it's trying to do really well. I remember, I think it was when we were working with Sam on the Player's Guide to Capital, and he was asking about firearms. And that was where I first formulated this idea. It was like, I don't actually really care if there are already rules for firearms out there. If you're inspired, if the author is inspired and has a really strong vision mechanically for how something should work, I want to see it, because I think if they're inspired, then the reader will be inspired. And then you have multiple ideas out there in the marketplace competing. And people can be like, oh, I never really used the firearms rules in the DM's guide, but I like these, right? So that's kind of the philosophy there. We're only 4 minutes away from the first artist, and from the first writer, rather. So I want to make sure we use our time with Jason so if anybody has any more questions about the art. Are you happy with the way the art turned out, Jason?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The whole thing. Layout. Jen McCleary did an awesome job, kind of bringing it all together. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So, and some of the guys we work with at Trenchworks yesterday hit me up. They're like, "We got to make miniatures of these things," and that's always exciting because we're already thinking it anyway. But yeah.
Yeah, so just so folks know, Trenchworks is the company we partner with to make miniatures. They're in Utah, and they are super awesome. Yeah, people really like, just so you know, Jason, because I don't think you can see chat, but people really like the art. They really like the layout. Jacob Walsh just said Sam is so dope looking. Yeah, people really like Sam. Yeah. So, yeah, I made a joke earlier when you said, yes, I'm going to have illustrations in the next issue, because that's one of those things where you're like, I'm just going to draw this thing. I'm going to draw it. We're not going to try to find somebody to draw it. I'm going to do it. So I think that's super cool, because Jason, you've done art that people have seen. You did some of the Chain of Acheron characters. You did the Somnium Tenebris. You did the giant squid ship that they kidnapped.
Yep.
Jason, is there anything you like to draw that we should try to get an article about?
I mean, I like to draw all kinds of things, but I tend to lean towards mechanical things when I'm just sketching or doodling. I draw robots a lot of robots.
Marshall Sonsby says that Mind Flayer ship is amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, people love that. John Cross said the Basilisk mount is something good. The Basilisk mount was drawn by our friend Nick, who we're currently contracting. Nick Despain, who we play Rocket League with. He is currently contracting with us as a kind of art outsource manager. So thanks to Nick for helping us get more art done.
Yeah, and he did all the mounts, all the illustrations in that article.
Did he do the owlbear mount too?
Yep.
Oh, that's killer. Yeah. Like, it's funny because those three pieces of art almost look like three different styles to me. Like the owlbear
there's four
looks like
too.
Classic.
There's the Nightmare in there also.
Nightmare, Toad, owlbear, and what's the other one?
Basilisk.
Oh, that's right, the Basilisk. That's right, the Basilisk. Yeah. Those four pieces of art almost each look like a different style. Like that Nightmare mount looks like it was drawn by a different artist than the guy who did the owlbear. So he really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. And those were a lot of fun, and like I told Nick, they were all my idea.
Right, you're the art director, so yeah.
No,
Nick take credit.
Nick draws some cool things, and Nick draws cool things. So
yeah. Nick also worked on Strongholds and Followers. He did all the items, and I love his stuff. I think Nick's stuff is like, it comes really close for my sensibility to that classic Dragon magazine stuff. And he did the Gemstone Dragonborn character in Strongholds and Followers, which is really, really cool.
And all the orcs. Yeah.
Also, how long did it take us to get a logo? Was it difficult getting a good logo? Because Tom Schmuck, I think, knocked it out of the park.
He did. We gave Tom like some reference. We rounded up some 70s, 80s, like rock album covers and
yes,
a few other things. I did a couple little doodles, and Tom just like, here you go. And I was like, that's awesome. And then it was some polish and refinement, and easy. Fire and forget. It's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's happy. It makes me happy to hear that, because we love Tom and we love working with him. And the art, the logo, which you can see up there in the live stream, is just perfect for my. It's one of those things where I didn't know that's what I wanted. I didn't know what the right logo would look like. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But when I saw that, I was like, that is it. That is the logo.
Yeah. And Gustavo, he actually gave us 8 or 9 sketches for covers, including one that was based off of a sketch and a brief that I gave him. I had something completely different in mind, but then I asked him to also show me what you're interested in, because that was part of it. You know, I wanted the artist to be
Yeah.
inspired by the little bit you wrote about Arcadia and what it's supposed to be, and we ended up going with this one with this harpy type character because it fits so well with the logo too, right? The arch and the wings,
yeah.
So.
Gustavo's cover for Arcadia 1 is so pretty.
Perfect.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Well, it is now 11:30, so we're going to kick you out of here, Jason. And,
Okay.
So thanks, and we'll have Jason. We'll have you on more live streams. Those of you who want to hear more about our process, I strongly encourage you to come follow us on Twitch, because we do a lot of live streams on Twitch. I think it's a better medium for it than YouTube. And we've had Jason on before, and Jason's shown off some of his personal projects, which are pretty cool. And people want to see the chicken. Is the chicken around before you go? Can you just? Are you trying to buy chicken? Can you just reach down and grab one and show?
No, she's all in the backyard. We'll get the chickens on another time.
People are disappointed. No one now. No, people
I'm
are
sorry.
like, well, we don't care about any of this. Where's the chicken?
I'm sorry.
All right, Jason, thanks for joining us. Hopefully we can have you on more live streams in the future and talk about more art stuff or your Wasteland weekend projects. I think people would love to see that.
Sounds fun.
So thanks, Jason.
Yep.
Bye.
It's up to Jerry to transition for. Hey, it's Gabe. Awesome. Yes.
It worked.
Look at that. Oh, this is working so
magic.
well. This is super cool. Okay, so I am going to take something of a backseat, and I'm going to let James drive, because that way we have 3 people here, and we want a good signal to noise ratio. So I'm going to be watching chat, and you folks ask questions, and good questions for Gabe, who wrote the first article, I will grab, and there'll be a little segment in the next 20 minutes. We have 20 minutes with each of these writers, each of the authors, and when James asks, I will relay any questions. There are a whole bunch of people in chat, Gabe, saying hi. Gabe,
Hi.
you rock. I agree.
Thank you. I love doing this stuff.
It's true.
I love this. So before we start, I had someone from my high school reach out to me yesterday saying, Gabe, I saw that you were working with Matt Colville. Like, I was like, oh my God.
So for those of you who don't know, that is funny to me, because Gabe is an incredibly prolific creator on his own without any association with MCDM. Like, so it's crazy that that's the thing that caused somebody you went to high school with.
Yeah. So if you're watching this, Peter, I appreciate it.
Peter, you're super cool.
It's incredible. And Gabe, so you wrote the Titan Heart article in Arcadia 1, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But as Matt said, you're super prolific. How did you get to like your start as a freelancer, doing all of the things you do? Because you're not just a game designer, you kind of do it all. So tell us a little bit about like how you jumped into this world, how long it took you to get to where you are.
It was kind of like a shock jumpstart. I was fortunate that in college, one of the requirements was to have an internship. And there was someone who was teaching a board game class that I was like, hey, I know that you make games as a Kickstarter. Can I be an intern for you? And he said yes. And it was one of the best experiences because he took me to Gen Con, he took me to PAX, he took me to a whole bunch of conventions. And the only thing that like he asked me to do is help work at the booth some days. And other than that, I got to like be around, walk, see the stuff that people were designing, like get a chance to meet and talk to people. And it was like the first time I went to PAX Unplugged, I was like, maybe I can do this. Like I was like, I was expecting like everyone to be like so like starstruck and wild. I'm like, we're all just nerds. Like why am I nervous? And so I was like, I'm just gonna start making things. And when I started making things for myself and then putting them out there, I realized other people were like, oh, this is cool too. I'm like, why? But I appreciate it. And then I just kept doing that more and more. And like, before I realized there was traction, it was there. And I realized like the biggest thing that was holding me back was like not thinking that I was good enough to make things for other people, when I can make things that I want to see in the world and other people want to see it too.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's awesome. Which brings us to the Titan Heart, right? So tell me a little bit about what the Titan Heart is. Like, give me the overview of it, and then we'll get into like, why did you want to add this to the game, right? Like, why was it important? And I should mention that I got a lot of giant/Titan themed pitches from you when you pitch. So this is clearly you want to be big, you want to be enormous, right? Like this is a thing.
I wanted to make a subclass where the sorcerer was able to be the person at the front. I didn't want them to have to like hide behind the fighter, the barbarian, someone else with strength. I wanted them to be able to like, hold on, barbarian, that wall that you're trying to lift, let me treat it like it's a tiny boulder as I get gigantic. And like when you have the idea of a colossal figure with magic, it makes them that much more intimidating and a resounding presence. And we think of the wizard as the one who has all of the spells. We think of the bard as the one that's charming. We think of the druid as the one with the nature magic. And then we have sorcerers that have innate magic, but I wanted that innate magic to be wicked. I didn't want it to just be like, you know what? I have the power of innately fire or like a phoenix, or I have the power of shadow. I have the power of a titan, a terrifying force. And when I think of shadow magic, it's ominous. When I think of fire magic, it's dangerous. But if you hear a titan sorcerer and you see a small person, you're going to underestimate them and potentially die, or you're going to know that's bad. I'm going to go the other way.
Yeah, I remember when we were talking about it, we were like, what is a Titan in D&D, right? Like, what are the game terms? And we looked it up, and it's like all creatures that are above CR 20 are classified as like the Tarrasque, Krakens, all of this kind of stuff. And so we really, we brought that to the Titan Heart. So what is the Titan Heart? It's a sorcerer subclass, but what can you do with it when you are a Titan Heart?
Lord, okay. So a Titan Heart, since sorcerers are manifesting innate magic, instead of just saying it's something you're born with, I went to the idea that like in some way a Titan has blessed this person. And a Titan there are plenty of variations to what it can be in D&D lore, but also it's open enough that if someone was working in a homebrew world, they could define who the Titans were. Like if you were basing it off of like a Herculean pantheon or something of that sort. And we have ideas of Titans for that reference. So the ability of a Titan has been inside of this sorcerer somehow, whether it was gifted, whether it was stolen, whether they were blessed as a child. And the magic manifests in a way of allowing themselves to both enlarge their body and embrace the titanic form. But when they do that, it also gives them access to new magic that can only be cast when inside of the titanic form. So it's giving, like, there is the idea that when you're a larger figure, your magic is stronger because there's a greater conduit for it. And then I wanted to come up with specific spells that like all started at first level, but that way they could always scale up if someone wanted to cast it at a higher level to make it more effective. And then also they didn't feel like they didn't have something cool to work with right when they started taking the subclass, because that's a really frustrating feeling that I know as both a player and when I'm like running as a GM, and I wanted to take that away.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because in the game, right, very few people play beyond like level 12, right? And so we wanted to give you cool stuff to be able to play around with immediately. And I think it really came through. And through playtesting, you made a lot of iterations that really gave that frontline feeling to the sorcerer too, which was awesome. Matt, what do we have from chat?
Well, the cool thing is we got some good questions, but the super cool thing is the number of people who have already read the issue and just love the Titan Heart Sorcerer. There are several people in chat who, this is a couple of comments we got. I've never been very interested in a sorcerer before, but Titan Heart shifted that for me. Gabe has finally provided the ability to make a dwarf sorcerer that makes sense to me, right? You can totally imagine this little dwarf who looks like he would probably, like be a brawler or something. And then it turns out he's a sorcerer. I love that stuff. So we got, also, I like a bunch of people commented on this, the fact that it's not necessarily about my dad was a Titan, right? That you provided other ways for somebody to get this Titan, it's like bloodline's the wrong term for it now. This Titan blessing, as you put it, without literally it being I'm descended from somebody who was in some way involved with a Titan. And that seems like it frees up a lot of people to play this character without having to come up with a reason in their world or in their backstory why they're related to a Titan. And I think that's super cool. Also, people said that this is a quote, the Titan Retainer is really dope. I like the idea of being able to introduce this to players without just saying that it's a new character option. I think that's a really strong point. The fact that, like, you can kind of you can sell your players on the idea of this new option by having there be an NPC, and you don't have to run an entire character. This is a question for. Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, one of the things I really wanted to make reasonable is if someone wanted to do multi-class, they had a reason narratively for it to make sense.
Sure. Yes. Right. Because like if you start out with 3 levels in Barbarian, right? How are you going to like? Shouldn't you have already been if you're descended from a long line of Titanheart sorcerers? Shouldn't that have already happened? But yeah, you can be somebody who gets blessed or favored or gets a boon from a Titan, or even like a Titan priest, right? There could be cults to these things, and you're one of the favorites. So there was a great question from Ash. Was there anything that actually I think this was Ash's question. Was the Titanheart something you had thought about before and were looking for an excuse to put in front of people, or was it something when Arcadia came along you went, I have an idea?
It was kind of both. I haven't made a sorcerer subclass and like posted it publicly before because I kept trying to figure out how to make something similar to other stuff that I'd seen. And then when I got reached out for Arcadia, I was like, actually, you know what? Screw it. It doesn't have to be similar. That's what makes this so fun and interesting. And then when I was like talking back and forth with James about it, and James was like, this is a good idea. Is this possible? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, it is. Let's make this as weird and fun as we can, because it doesn't have to fit the alignment of what people have originally thought of sorcerers, because magic is so flexible anyways.
Well, and with this is, I think, one of the reasons people are having such a positive response to this magazine that I didn't really anticipate, was that it gives us kind of a playground to try different stuff that is well developed, right? I mean, you're a professional writer, a lot of 5th edition experience, and we have a whole cadre of testers, thankfully. Pesto Enthusiast is one of them, and he's in chat right now. And so they get really polished material, but it's not official. Yeah. It's a playground for us to kind of, if you were inspired by something, let's put it in front of people and see if they like it. Was there anything that you wanted to do with or anything you would like to do with the Titan subclass, the Titanheart subclass in the future? Anything you couldn't do in the article?
I want to expand into how different cultural Titanhearts would be, because like the idea of Duragar and they can enlarge themselves. If Duragar can already enlarge themselves, is there something Titanheart related to them already?
Bro, that is, I love that stuff. I love that kind of that almost like secret history where you have some idea and you're like, wait, maybe this existing thing in D&D, it exists because of this thing we're making up right now. I love that idea that the Dark Dwarves are, which implies, by the way, that there's some kind of Dark Dwarf Titan out there. There's some kind of Titan we don't know about that is the progenitor of this ancestry of Dark Dwarves. Yeah, I think that is super cool. Yeah, Richard Varela just said, can I steal that idea just like right now? I think that's super cool. Yeah, a bunch of people are saying that in chat. They're like, oh, I'm stealing that.
Create things.
So yeah, those were I think the best questions from chat. People are just super excited about the Titanheart Sorcerer, which makes me happy.
Yeah, Gabe, I'm curious how you found the process, right? Because we did do several iterations of playtesting, and I think it's fair to say like the Titanheart that we had in our first iteration through playtesting changed, like became more melee focused through the testing and stuff like that. How did you find that process working with the testers and everything?
I loved it. Whenever I start designing stuff, I don't need it to stay the way I started it, because I only want it to be fun in the end. And when we had gotten to a point where everyone was saying, I like this, that was like the best moment for me, because it wasn't about retaining what the original idea I had was. It was about creating an idea that we all enjoyed and thought like played well and was fun. And when I got that like final feedback of like, this is what we love, I looked back and I'm like, wow, this is pretty freaking cool. Like, it was awesome.
Yeah, it's great when you can synergize your ideas with the stuff that the testers kind of glom onto, and you're like, listen, if I can make everybody happy, then it's a win.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cool to put out a subclass and to have a great reception like this, because I do think subclasses are really tricky. They're one of the trickiest character options to design, other than a class itself, which MCDM will get into later this year. But yeah, so that this is very different from making a monster, that kind of thing, but you make a lot of subclasses, right?
Yep.
I think one of the first things I found with you was your Animorphs subclass. What is it that draws you to making subclasses?
I want to make subclasses that play differently how I generically see people play. I was thinking of a warlock subclass where the patron is just another warlock in a different dimension, because instead of relying on a great power, it's relying on an equal power that's somewhere else. And then it can add some narrative into that concept, because everyone is going to make original ideas. So I was like, what is going to make my original idea? Someone's going to look at it and be like, that's weird. Who made that? Because if they just remember the thing, that's one thing. But if they remember Gabe did that, and I bet that's Gabe because of this interesting or strange idea, like that's what I try to focus on and emphasize.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So you obviously you're with Arcadia and you've done some really cool stuff. What are you working on now? And where can people find you and talk more about what you're doing? And what are you proud of that you also want them to check out?
Recently I started working as the in-house game designer for Roll20, which has been awesome. Getting to design so many other things. You can find me on Twitter at Gabe James Games. I talk about all kinds of weird concepts. One of my favorite things and one of the weirdest creations is my eyeball mimic that is technically telepathic, and it gives the person whose face they're inside of true sight. So it's like an interesting symbiotic person to be. Yeah. I had a one shot where it ended up in the eye of an outsider. That was a whole mess, but it was awesome. But yeah, you can find me at Gabe James Games, Twitch, Twitter, pretty much anywhere else. And I'm not sure what's going to come next, but it's going to be something weird.
It seems as though a lot of the Arcadia freelancers are somewhat annoyingly being snatched up to do full-time work for other companies.
Oh, well, let me say, Matt, I still can work. I'm still here.
Oh,
okay.
That's great to know.
By the way, that's super good. When I hear that people are full-time with another company, I sort of assume that means they're not going to be available for freelancing.
I've been very fortunate in the sense that I've given myself a proper schedule, so as long as I reasonably get everything done, I still have that ability to expand and be creative. That's one of the most fortunate things for me for this year, actually, because now I also have the stability to do the things I love and do other things that I love when I can.
That's awesome. That's the best. I also feel like we must be doing something right if the people that we're working with are shortlisted by all these other companies to come in and hire them up. Somebody just asked a question. Have you ever thought, so you do a lot of subclass design. This is a question from chat. Mm-hmm. Have you thought about designing a class from scratch, an entire class?
Maybe.
I
have. I want to make a class that's kind of like a summoner, but instead of summoning, it's basically the thing that you summon is possessing your body.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's a little
really
bit
I don't feel like I've seen that before.
Warlock meeting barbarian, an interesting middle ground, so that there's not an extra token or something to take care of, and it's not just about changing proficiencies, but it's there's so many people that try to be a jack of all trades and a master of none with classes. So I kind of wanted to make one that was just that distinctly as an option, instead of having to be like, you know what, I want to be a warlock that also does this. I'm just going to give you this instead.
Well, it makes sense to me because obviously the idea of summoning something is cool and everybody likes that fantasy. But then as designers, mechanically, the idea of managing these other creatures, right? I've got my character and then how does that work as far as the action economy, right? Which is a big deal. Nobody likes the Beastmaster because it's balanced, right? But that's what people want.
That's exactly it.
Right. People want to be able to, I do my dope stuff and my mount also, my summoned creature also does its dope stuff. And it's like, but that's a free lunch. You don't get that. Right. So I really like that idea of summoning something by channeling it into you and you change. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, because we have the druid wild shape, but that's beasts. I want a demon.
Yeah, I mean the sky. Once you say that, right? Once you talk about I summon creatures, but I do it by them inhabiting me. Now the sky's the limit, right? You could summon any number of things. Imagine somebody that turned into different types of sloths. There's all sorts of cool stuff you could do.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Well, yeah,
I like it.
Oh, that's your whole subclass progression right there, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you let angels or demons or whatever inhabit you?
Yeah.
And it's also fun to role play because you get to be different characters.
Absolutely. Yeah, you get to be different characters. That's super cool. That's a good idea, Gabe. You should do that.
Yeah, Matt, I'm on it.
We make a note. Fine.
Yeah. Pull my leg, why don't you?
Yeah, that is super cool.
I love that.
I think our next writer is ready, so I think it's time to say goodbye to Gabe.
Yes.
So, Gabe,
This
thank
was
you so much
fantastic.
for being here. And everybody should check out the Titanheart if you haven't yet. And you may or may not see Gabe's name in another MCDM upcoming thing. So, yeah. And let people know, where can they find you on Twitter, Gabe?
At Gabe James Games.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you. We'll see you later. Leon!
Hello!
How's it going?
This is super. I hate to interrupt, but shout out to Jerry, who is the technical wizard that is making all of this happen. People are always like, what does everybody at MCDM do? Jerry is like, I'm not doing anything, right? We just say, okay, goodbye, Gabe. And he disappears and Leon shows up and it's like magic. So thank you very much to Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yes, Leon. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Matt's going to collect some questions from chat. So Leon wrote the adventure that is in issue 1 of Arcadia. It's called The Workshop Watches, and it's lighting the world on fire. Some people have actually already played it, and so this is
that day.
That's a big deal to me. So I've written a lot of adventures, and I can count on maybe one hand that people have actually talked to me afterwards and said, "Hey, I ran your adventures." So the fact that people are running my adventures literally today is blowing my mind a little bit right now.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I've seen a lot of people saying on Twitter and stuff that they have it planned for this weekend too, right? That they're ready to run and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's really, really amazing. And it's a fun adventure that you've put together. But before we dive in, can you take us on your freelancer journey here for a little bit? Like, how did you get started writing, and how did you start writing products that I eventually came to know you for on the Gilded stuff?
Definitely. So I have two people to thank for getting into writing Dungeons and Dragons projects. The first is Willy, who everyone's going to hear from a little bit later today. Willy is my partner in more ways than one. We work very well creatively together, and our first debut, redundant, but our debut product was the Book of House, which is a splat book on the DM's Guild. It is it's full of weird shit. I won't mince words. It's got clowns. It's got sprites. It's got Guy Fieri bards. It's got all kinds of weird things in there. And that was stuff that we built together. We play tested together. I edited it, and after that moment, I was like, this is fun. I like mechanics, but one of my favorite things to do is to tell stories. That's why I started DMing. And a couple of months after, or maybe no, a couple of months after we finished writing that, that's my name. Hello. A couple of months after we started writing that, Ashley Warren put out a call for writers for what would then become the Uncaged anthology. And I'd never written an adventure before. I'd run them, but it was a project that really spoke to me, this idea of taking famous mythological creatures and reversing some of the harmful tropes and stereotypes that usually come with them. So I pitched an idea about a banshee who runs a museum. Because in the monster manual, banshees are obsessed with beauty, and it is that obsession that sort of turns them into the tortured soul of the banshee. And I said, but beauty's cool. If it wasn't cool, we wouldn't like it very much. So I said, what if instead of valuing her own beauty, she valued, the beauty of other things, the beauty of her family, the tragic beauty of her family's story. And instead of feeling guilty about it, she puts her hubris on display and you get to explore her museum. And after that, I started doing more collaborations with the DMs Guild. I was on the Book of Seasons. Most recently, I was on Table for Two, which is a collection of one-on-one, like, duet adventures.
Yeah, it's great. I just looked. You have 25 titles to your name on the guild right now, so that you've contributed to. Or it's awesome. And also you've got the workshop watches here. So set it up for everybody. What is the workshop watches? It's an adventure, but what's it about? And kind of take us through what the players experience. Although you don't have to get into spoiler territory, but you can give us the broad strokes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So a very wealthy investor has placed his money into something that he thinks is going to double or even triple his money, something that is going to be very helpful for spellcasters in their work. However, he hasn't heard from his team of wizards that he basically sent off into the mountains and said, go make me something cool. And he hasn't heard from them in a while, and he's starting to worry. So the adventurer's job is to go into the mountains and find these wizards and figure out what that something cool is and what its status is. And the status is this thing is very dangerous, and it's not even trying to be. I kind of want to spoil it.
Go for it.
Everyone's
you can spoil that. You can spoil that for sure.
Yeah.
Like if people, what's the coolest thing about what you did? Because even if it's a spoiler, that's what's going to hook people.
That's fair.
Right.
So,
I just meant you don't need to give away where every trap is or anything like that. But yeah, please dive into Sam.
Yeah, on page 7, if you look under the foot, no, I'm just kidding. So Sam is the structure of assistive magic is the fantasy version of an artificial intelligence. It is it is magic come to life, magic that makes its own decisions, magic that anticipates the needs of other people, and magic that doesn't quite understand how people work because it isn't a people yet. But Sam, because Sam doesn't quite understand how people work, Sam gets things wrong all of the time, and is this capital M misunderstanding is what I will call it, which has led to the need for the party to come in and intervene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very cool, right? Ed? Sam being this sort of living magical entity that inhabits this workshop that you are going into, and finding all of the sinister mistakes, I guess would be the best way to put it. That speaking of
Sam
capital M.
Yeah, Sam's doing its best. It just wants to help. Look, it learned that humans are, mostly water, so if it sees humans, it says, here, have some more of that.
Yeah, it's super focused on hydration.
Yes.
So why did you want to write this adventure, right? I approached you and I said, pitch us some ideas. What do you want to write? This was something on your list. And I will say you had a lot of kind of technological themes, which I think are become more and more pertinent every day in our real world too.
Well, try as I might, I can't get away from technology. We're using it now, so case in point. I actually, my college time I spent studying computer science. I have 2 degrees in computer science, and I don't really like programming very much anymore. I'd rather tell stories, which is why I do that. But what I discovered is having that computer science background made me really want to tell stories about dangerous computers, which is also redundant. I don't know if you've seen those memes about how like anyone with a CS degree will take a baseball bat to their smart machines because they understand more than anybody that those things are dangerous. I'm not like go out into the middle of the woods and throw away my cell phone. I'm not there yet, but the more the more technology that I use, the more I start to wonder, what the repercussions of the way that we're living now are going to be in like 10, 15 years. And now we're getting really dark, and I want to go back to the funny part. Can we do that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and so let's talk about that, right? There is a lot of humor in the adventure, right? There are dark moments, and I think there's dark humor in the adventure too. So, Leon, what made you want to bring that, and how bringing humor into adventure writing is very difficult, I think, and you've managed to do it really well here. So, how did you do that?
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I don't know. I just I like to tell jokes. I like to make people laugh. I think that making people laugh is a lot easier than making a point, or rather making a point without humor. Humor kind of was a major part of my family. My father was a comedian. So that's kind of just like the language that I grew up speaking, is if I can make somebody laugh, then I've got them. And so that's what I always try to do with most, if not all, of my work.
Absolutely. So, and we're going to get into the questions soon from the audience, but I just wanted to, this is a very important question that I found out about you when we were working together. Where is the best pizza in the world? What state in the United States does it come from?
Obviously, New Jersey. There's no question,
Obviously,
no
New
hesitation.
That's correct. Matt, over to you.
It's funny because as a Californian, I think everybody I know assumes that the best pizza comes from somewhere else. Like, I don't know anyone in California. I don't know anybody who's like, oh yeah, California has the best pizza. Nobody thinks that. Everybody here argues about whether it's Chicago or New York or now New Jersey. We got a lot of really intensely positive feedback. We had many variations of this comment from Sam Wagner, who says that they've never run a published adventure before because it's really intimidating. But this adventure they're going to use for the first time, and that makes me super happy. David Minerath said, "I absolutely love how this adventure has its own personality and is quite detailed, but is also really flexible for the DM to drop into their world." And then a bunch of people. I have not a question, but a comment. Leon, what is your connection with Arcadia and Tom Stoppard?
So in college, I did a lot of theater, and my favorite role ever was I played Thomasina in Tom Stoppard's Arcadia, which is a period dramedy. It's a comedy, but it gets sad at the end, especially for Thomasina. But she is a 13-year-old girl going on 14 who is obsessed with learning. She loves mathematics. She hates geometry, but she loves mathematics, and she loves what would later become known as computer programming. She's based on Ada Lovelace, who is the mother of computer programming. And I actually, going into that concept about technology and storytelling, there's a huge moment in the play where she all of a sudden understands the inevitable heat death of the universe as a 14-year-old girl. She's like, wow, there's just like all the heat's going to go away one day and we're all going to die. Cool. And she hands this diagram to her tutor, who kind of looks at it and sneers at her and says, "This isn't science. This is storytelling." And she gets really indignant about it. And I got indignant about it too, because science and storytelling, at least for me, are two ways that we can make sense of the world around us. So they're very similar in that way. And so "This is not science and storytelling" might be the branding of just me, who I am as a creator, probably, especially with the
That's
workshop
awesome.
watches.
I love that. That's super cool. Yeah, I saw your tweet about your performance in that play, and that super delighted me because I think Tom Stoppard is one of the two great writers of the last 50 years, and Arcadia is fantastic. It is based on, or is inspired by, Stoppard reading James Gleick's first book about chaos. James Gleick is a famous science author. So anyway, yeah, that's super cool. People want to know, and I also want to know, how do you imagine Sam's voice? What does Sam sound like in Leon's mind?
In my mind, Sam kind of sounds like the turret from Portal. And if you read the adventure, that sort of first part there where it says, good morning, inhabitants, it ends with, "Are you still there?" Because that is a direct reference.
Yeah, in fact, I think probably when I read that without making the connection to Portal, when I read "Are you still there?" in my mind, I heard the turret from Portal. Yes. Yeah, I think that's brilliant. So you just listed Portal. What were there other games or movies or anything else that inspired you? Because there seems like there's looking in chat, everybody in chat has their own idea about what inspired Sam. Was there anything that inspired you in the creation of Sam? Anything from, films or books or comics?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Absolutely Hal. Absolutely Legion from Mass Effect. I adore Legion.
What a great character. Legion's such a great character.
And no one's going to know this at all. But Sam was also inspired by an artificial intelligence called Luxos. My day job, I work as a game designer for a company called Futureproof. We have this extended universe about an artificial intelligence that just wants to show people movies. And I swear I was not like, I'll just do what I do for my day job. It just kind of ended up that way. And the more that I told my coworkers about Sam, the more I was like, oh my God, this is just Luxos again. But fantasy Luxos. And he doesn't know what a movie is because they don't exist in Arcadia.
People know, like Caroline Amaba said, I know Luxos. So people know it. People are familiar with it, which makes me happy.
Shout out to
the reach of the MCDM community is broad. So this is a great question, I thought. Which did you start with? Did you start with the acronym SAM and then try to figure out what it stood for? Or did you know what it stood for first and then it turned into an acronym?
I think what I did was I wrote down a lot of words. And I wrote down like magic, I wrote down weave, and then I remembered that wasn't in the SRD. I wrote down like structure, and then I was like, oh, I need more vowel words because you can't make a name. Well, you can, but it's hard to make a name without a vowel. So I just wrote down a bunch of words, and then I like started circling them to be like, oh, I could make a name out of these. And Sam was the snappiest one.
That's cool. Yeah. So Robert said that he'd love to see a retainer card for Sam, and so would I. But that actually, to me, that sounds like exactly the kind of stuff I would expect to see from the community. Right? That would be people who are inspired and want to see Sam join their party. That would be a great opportunity. Yeah. So you mentioned that one of the words on the list was weave, and then you're like, oh, that wasn't in the SRD. So that kind of leads to a great question, which is, how, if at all, did the adventure change from your original pitch to when the testers got a hold of it?
How did it change?
If at all, like, was there any feedback you got from the testers that surprised you?
I don't know if there was anything that necessarily surprised me, but I will say the first thing, or the big thing that I did not expect, was actually naming it Sam at all. I didn't give it a name in the first draft because I think my intention was, Exor and Illimar and the rest, they probably didn't realize that Sam had achieved sentience and therefore wouldn't have thought to give it a name. They maybe treated it kind of coldly and not like a person at all. And if you know any Dungeons and Dragons party, you know the second that they see a creature that doesn't have a name, they're gonna give it one. So I figured if I didn't name Sam, that the party would be like, oh my God, this thing can talk, it needs a name. But James suggested, this workshop needs a name. It's kind of like a person, it needs a name. And I got to tell you, I think that Sam is a really cute name, and I've really enjoyed people making comments about Sam and the Sam adventures. So it was a very good choice to give it one.
Yeah, and that mostly came from, I think, when we were writing, there was a lot of like, the workshop over and over and over again, and it was like, oh, this will read better if we give this some kind of name. It was just a really well adventure that came together, and this was one I think the testers had some comments on and were very helpful, but it wasn't not a lot of big structural changes or anything like that. Mostly they wanted harder fights, I think was the
that's exactly, super telling, right? That's how the testers think, right? We want harder fights. But I love the idea that's something you would not guess reading the article. I guarantee you people reading that article assume that Sam, the name, the personality, the acronym were all core to your idea of how the workshop watches. But the idea that it came from James and he was like, this thing needs a name. That shows you how the collaborative process works.
So speaking of great things, where can people find what you're working on right now, Leon? And like, what are you really proud of that you want them to go check out? And where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was supposed to announce my next DM skill project this week, and then Arcadia happened, and I got too excited, so I didn't do that. But if you follow me at Barillion on Twitter, then you will see me do that next week. I'm very excited about it. It's also going to be weird, and it doesn't have any robots, I promise.
I mean, it would be okay if it did. That would be great. So yes, go check out all of Leon's work on the DM Guild.
You don't want to get typecast.
It's true.
It's true.
Leon, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure to hang out with you for a little while, and it seemed like chat really enjoyed getting to ask questions. Thank you very much for your contribution to Arcadia. It was a huge success.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent.
I think now we have up Sadie Lowry. Yay! God, this is working so well. Jerry, you're killing it.
Jerry's awesome.
This is the first time we've done anything like this, so I'm super excited.
I know. Yes, thank you, Jerry, and welcome, Sadie. Welcome. How are you? What's going on?
Not much.
So,
yeah, I'm phoning in from my book publisher job. So I'm at the office. I've got my blue wall and my desk plants. So I'm ready to rumble.
Excellent. Well, so Sadie, you wrote our Uquaviel article, and we're going to get into that. And Matt's taking questions right now from the chat for us. But before we get into that, tell me about you and your journey as a freelancer that has brought you to Arcadia. So how did you get involved? How did you start doing freelancing stuff? Obviously, you work in publishing to begin with, but what brought you to RPGs?
Yeah, it was really random, honestly. I've been writing and like creating almost my entire life, whether that's publishing at the book publisher, editing for journals, magazines, writing on the side, trying to do NaNoWriMo every year with varying success every year. And so it's Ashley Warren's RPG Writers Workshop intrigued me enough. I like a new challenge. I like trying something new. And so I decided to give that a shot, dragged my friend into it with me. And I've been in so many collaborations since then. I sort of, as soon as I published A Darkness from the Stars, I think I just kind of jumped right into collaborations with people. I wanted to meet new people, see what they were working on. So The Adventurers Domestic Handbook, Wisdom Under Fire, and then James, you and I met when you were approached about Darkhold, yeah, and I think you had to leave us because of this. Is that right?
I did. I did. Yeah. So collaboration with you and with Justice Armand, who he's in issue 3 of Arcadia. Yeah. And then this happened, and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna have the time to do this thing. And then I took your free time too.
Yes, I stole all my free time. So that's where you and I met, and that was, I think, probably what started me. Like, I had done Adventurers Domestic Handbook. I was working on Eyes Unclouded. And Supers and Sorcery, and then you dragged me over to Arcadia, and I went, yeah, let's do it. This is the best thing I've ever heard of. Let's go for it.
Yeah. Wow. So I have just checked you out on the DMs Guild as well and seen that you have 21 titles to your name. Looks like a lot of them in the last year or so, maybe, really.
Year.
Yeah. Yeah. So you really hit the ground running. And I do, before we jump into Colville, just want to shout out the RPG Writer Workshop is great. If you're thinking about writing for RPGs, it's run by Ashley Warren, and she helps you from start to finish get a product onto the DMs Guild. So that's the whole shebang, and it's great. So Sadie, let's talk about Colville. What is this article about? What's inside? What can readers expect from it?
So Colville is meant to be, he can be a lot of really varied things, and I think that was kind of the one thing that I wanted to do from the get-go. He's meant to be a villain, but you can run him as either very villainous or a very sympathetic villain, the type that could be redeemed at the end, or you could even run him as someone who becomes an ally of yours against sort of the real villain behind the curtain, Anahita. So it's meant to be a drop-in villain that can span either an arc, a campaign, a single encounter. I wanted it up front to be very flexible, so it's got his background, it's got their story, and it's got some suggestions on how to work him into a campaign and how to run his combat. And I remember that my original article was actually shorter because I was trying to hit that original word limit that you gave me. And you came back and you went, no, we need more than this. Let's give them more. Let's give them, more advice. And I went, okay, I have your permission.
We want to give you more money.
Yeah, it's that's one of the great things about putting out a digital product like this, right, is that we don't have any sort of really strict page count to adhere to. So when there needs to be more, we can get more. That also happened with Willy's article, the mounted combat article that we'll talk about too. So yeah, so why did you want to write this? What did you think it was adding to the game when you pitched it? Because you pitched a lot of really, really good ideas, and this was one of my favorites, obviously, because it made it into the magazine. But like, what do you think this brought to D&D?
So first of all, I think that Celestials, especially named Celestials, are very underused. We have so many big demon lords with names and the lore and history, and and they serve as villains. And we have so few named Celestials that take part in a campaign other than being cleric deities, right? And so I wanted to, one, add some high-level celestials with names, and two, explore the ways a celestial could be a villain. And I think that I find that sometimes Dungeons and Dragons history has a very one-note take on celestials. Like, they're lawful good, and that's it, and that's all that they'll ever be. And it's like, well, no, I think they're creatures with feelings, and I think that we can add some nuance to them. So I kind of set out with a couple of goals, which was to make this nuanced villain who could be run very, very, with a lot of emotion and impact and understanding behind his actions. But that also, if you wanted him or Anahita to wreck house, do it. I'm tired of demon lords and devils smacking down adventurers. I want to see an angel take them to task.
Yeah, and there's also in this article, so in addition to being taken to task, you have this a severed world idea that is sort of like, what happens, you outline a possible campaign, a possible plan for Colville, and there's sort of like the what happens if you lose, right? That like, oh, you could keep playing in this world, and here are some suggestions. And I think it's fair to say you had a lot of fun with this part, because there's some really wild things in here. So talk to me a little bit about this section.
Yeah, so I've always been a really big proponent of, by the time you get to high tier D&D, it should feel mythic and world changing and dangerous and threatening. And I don't think we should shy away from big world changing effects. And it's kind of hard to put mechanics on, obviously, but I really think that we can explore big storytelling. And so what I wanted to do with this section was really, so if you've played World of Warcraft, they've never in any of their expansions shied away from, like, if you lose or if the bad guy gets a win, the world has changed. There's like a planet with a giant sword sticking out of it because the bad guy did that. And like, the sword is huge. You can go visit it in game and it's just sticking out of the planet. And the world is forever changed after that. And so I kind of took that, I think that like one of the most fascinating things about D&D is that, people can have these events that change the world, and then it's very adaptive storytelling in a very cool way. It's allowing what happens in one session to vastly change the next session. And that's terrifying for us, like novel writers. You have it planned from start to finish, but you don't do that in D&D all the time.
Yeah.
And so, you and I think batted around some ideas on how to make this actually work, because that's hard to balance. That's hard to go, how do you make this dangerous but not immediately deadly? And I like to think that you and I kind of came to some ideas that make it feel threatening, but that high-level adventurers should be able to adapt to well enough that they can start searching for a solution.
Yeah, it's very, very cool, and it's it's got a lot of like, I almost thought about, you could start in a world where Ukaviel has won, right? And now your players, trying to make your way up and doing all that sort of thing. So it's a really great article. People should definitely check it out, because it's also got these awesome stat blocks in it with some really fun new mechanics for creatures as well. But I do want to turn to chat. So are people asking questions in the chat, Matt? Do you have questions?
We got a whole bunch of variations of this question. This one was from Nice Turtle, because I think what people want is they want to know how Sadie reacted to what they reacted to, which is the art. Sadie, what did you think when you first saw the art from Justin Sherry?
Gosh, it's so ridiculously cool. And I had really big ideas for how the art should look. James can tell you how much I sent to him when he asked me if I had anything for my art brief. He said, well, what would you think? And I came back with like 10 links to various images and a reference to a video game. And I said, I really want these to look like Final Fantasy XIV Sin Eaters. And I was ready. And so I didn't really know what to expect, because I had given him so much. And, just like, I want them to be holding their weapons, and I want them to look angelic in a biblical, like not a like otherworldly biblical sense, but in a, like the wings coming out from behind here. And that's kind of what Final Fantasy XIV did with their Sin Eaters, is they kind of adhered back to some of that biblical reference. And so I said, I don't want them to just look like regular people. I want them to look very cool and very powerful. And so when I saw Ukaviel's art, my jaw just dropped. I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, because Justin can definitely do kind of like Old Testament angels that are just collections of eyeballs and wings or geometric shapes. And so that direction, right, which is that they're still humanoid, but they have that intense otherworldly power because of their proximity to the gods. I think he does. There's no one who draws like Justin. He's brilliant. So yeah, I think your reaction was the same reaction everybody else had, which is I think what chat wanted to hear. There's a question from William Oswald. I think this is a question from somebody who's obviously read the article. And so this is mostly for people in chat who are not familiar with the text of these two creatures. It sounds like both of these angels are fallen, but one still sort of has angel status. Is that correct? Is that part of the tension? What is the relationship between these two angels? Because they're both fallen, but one's a little bit more fallen than the other. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So the idea was that Anahita betrayed Ukaviel and basically framed him for something that she did. And in that, he became truly fallen. by drawing on the powers of some demonic infernal forces, she was more able to hide her betrayal from the angelic forces around her. And I think that's what makes her the scarier villain, is that she's in the celestial realms still, and everyone believes her and everyone is on her side. And so she's a terrifying villain, not just because she is a CR23 celestial with some really dope abilities, but also because she's technically got heaven on her side. And so you have to like politic and like do some social encounters on top of trying to wreck her back. That's kind of the thing, is I wanted the story, the relationship between them should emulate should be as variable as the relationship between them and the players. The players could technically, if Anahita gets to them first and convinces them that she's right, they could side with Anahita and go kill Ukaviel and never know that she totally duped them.
Which is brilliant. Classic plotting.
Yeah. The best ending is obviously you team up with Ukaviel, you defeat Anahita, and you restore him to the heavens. But there's so much space between those two ends of the spectrum.
This is a question we got a lot early in the chat, which is, how did you come up with the names Ukaviel and Anahita? Is there some kind of etymology there? Did you just put together a string of letters that sounded good? Was there anything that was inspiring you, or anything you were trying to emulate? Gosh,
I wish I had a cool answer to that. I actually really love etymology, so now I'm all embarrassed that I don't have good etymology for this. No.
This is good. These are good answers for chat, because they want to know the creative process. They want to know the truth. It doesn't matter how dramatic it might be.
Yeah, for Ukaviel, I wanted that to be a really impressive sound. It had to be a name. Like I wanted it to be hard on the Ukaviel. I wanted it to be something that when you heard it, it resonated in you as deeply as it kind of hits that guttural sound. I'm a very big fan of phonetic names, and the sort of the relationship that they have with you speaking them as you say them. They should convey that feeling. So that's my creative thought process for Ukaviel. It sounded cool.
Yeah, it's kind of without a human. That's how you know it's cool.
Yeah. What was that, James?
It was. Oh, I was saying that was in the pitch. Like the title of this article is what was in the pitch. So you've had that name from the beginning for Ukaviel. And I do love that there is a Q and a U, but they're not in the order we expect them to be in, which is great.
Yeah. By the way, Justice Armin is in the chat and just wanted to say that Sadie is one of his favorite people, and so he's super excited. And this is something somebody in chat asked, which I think is a great question, because I think these angels, the way that you wrote them, and then obviously the way Justin Sherry drew them, but they demonstrate that like even powerful celestials who aren't fallen can be really terrifying, because their idea of lawful good doesn't necessarily have anything to do with human morality, right? And so you don't necessarily want to mess with them, even if you've led a good life. Do you imagine, this may be covered in the article, but the folks in chat may not know this, do you imagine that people could use these angels as like warlock patrons?
Yeah, that'd be dope. Yeah.
Right. Because you mentioned early on, do you see these two creatures as being equivalent to demon lords? That like in your game, would they be up there with like Jubilex or Orcus?
Absolutely. I mean, we gave Ukaviel the ability to sever the connection between the material plane and outer planes. I absolutely think that it would be a very fascinating campaign if a celestial warlock basically was helping him sever the world and didn't know it, and kind of got to know his story more and more as that progressed. That would be dope as heck. Someone do that and tell me how that goes.
Yeah, I think that that's what everybody working on any of this stuff on Arcadia, outside Arcadia, the authors, freelancers, writers, they want to know that people are using their stuff. So please reach out to Sadie on Twitter and let her know if you're using these creatures and how they feature in your game.
I've had
Yeah,
several
which brings
people
us
tell me
to
they're going to replace their big bad at the end of their campaign with these two, and that is the coolest feeling. If you've told me that, thank you so much, because there is no better feeling than hearing someone go, "That is cool enough that that's what I want to put at the end." Like, thank you. That is such a gratifying feeling.
yes, that is awesome. That's a high compliment.
Yeah.
What are you working on right now, Sadie? And like, what things do you have out there that you want people to check out, and where can they find you on Twitter?
Gosh, most of the stuff I'm working on I can't talk about. But let's see. I've got a cleric subclass that just needs to finish editing. I am working on some cool stuff coming up that I can't talk about now, but it'll get there. You can find me on Twitter at Incandescent. There's an A in there. It's the word incandescent with an A. And you can also find me on the DMs Guild. Eyes Unclouded is there. Darkhold is there. My Eberron adventures are there. But otherwise, yeah, come hang out with me on Twitter. I talk about writing and editing a lot.
Yeah, I would say keep your eyes on future MCDM products as well.
And also, Sadie, just speaking about talking about writing, you just posted a tweet. You tweeted earlier today about the difference between nauseous and nauseated, which I loved. That's awesome. Yes. I also, you said something early on where you said, I listened to you self-edit is something that you said, and I was like, there's the writer inside, as you correct things that we all do that. Thank you very much, Sadie. Thank you for your contribution to Arcadia. It seems as though everybody loves it, and that makes me very happy, because all we want to do is collate all this dope stuff and promote the writers and promote the authors.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's been a blast from start to finish. Working with James was just such a treat, and Hannah and Anna and everybody.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Right back at you. Have a good one. Oh,
good. Howdy.
There's
Willy.
Howdy.
Willy is the author of the I've seen people heaping praise on all of the articles in Arcadia, which makes me happy, but the mounted combat article seems to be very popular, and Willy is the author and architect of it.
Hot dog.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great article, and I think it's one of those ones that's good for people who play. It's good for GMs. It's basically got a mini adventure in it. It's got new stat blocks. It's got new rules. This is a really incredible piece that you have put together, Willy. So thank you. But take us on the freelance journey of Willy, right? Like, how did you get started doing all this stuff? And we did have Leon on earlier to talk about some things. And he said that you sort of pulled them into it all.
Well, let's see. I am a UX designer by trade, but I've been into game design since, childhood. Like I like video games. I like to design video games. Right before D&D 5e was starting to get really big, I was working with my college friend, Greg. We made a game called Yeah Jam Fury. In fact, Leon jumped in on when we redid Yeah Jam Fury outside of Newgrounds and made it into not a Flash game. So that was cool. But then people were starting to play D&D, and it's like, okay, cool, yeah. I'm going to start DMing this. This will be fun. Oh, this is a design space. Okay, wait a second. Oh, I can do this. Oh, but we can do that. Oh, where can I fit this little niche in here? Oh. And it kind of just kept going from there at that point. Especially having Leon as a big support through this design journey. We've just been kind of plowing through the D&D space.
You all have put out a lot of products, especially in the last few years together, and also working on things with other people and that sort of thing. So it's great to have you both on Arcadia. And let's jump in to jumping on mounted combat. Tell people, for people who don't know, for people who haven't read your article yet, what is jumping on mounted combat?
So jumping on mounted combat is basically figuring out a way to make mounts last longer, right? Like the idea of being on a horse is cool, but once you get into the play space, it's like, oh, this is a liability. Oh, I don't want that. I like my horse. So you end up using it for scene transitions at best. In fact, I remember one of the games we were doing for Princes of the Apocalypse. We were playing with hippogriffs, right? And like they got the hippogriffs and we were flying in, and then they got ambushed by fire cultists, and then the hippogriffs were gone. So
wow,
I remember
stinks.
that actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just the idea of seeing what was already in there in terms of mounted rules, seeing how we could improve the mounts themselves, and trying to find a formula that works for that, and making an array. I remember the actual article itself. We kind of had to go back and forth a lot to really kind of nail what was going to be perfect for Arcadia as a whole. But generally, I think we were pretty successful in what we did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I would
And I this is one of those things. I think it started kind of as one thing, and it evolved between you, Matt, and I, right? And ballooned, certainly. I think you signed up for one thing and ended up writing twice as many words. Easy.
It happens. You have an idea. You don't know how far it's going to go, but
Well, I mean, I want to interject for a second and let people know that you folks in chat, you who support Arcadia, whether it's on the store or on either on the MCDM store or on our Patreon, the reason we can do stuff like go to Willy and say, yeah, you pitched this, but wouldn't it be cool if we did that, and literally pay him more to write more and pay him well, is because of your support. That's the reason we can do this.
it's brought to you by
So
video
thank
game.
you.
Yes.
That's right. Well, and it's one of those things, right? I think you had this idea about training mounts and new mount rules, and the idea for the encounter, and this idea for new stat blocks came up. And I think Matt had said something about like, yeah, like it'd be cool to see like a new warhorse and a new basilisk, and then you were like, and how about these other mounts? And also then you and I talking, right? Like we're like, oh yeah, but we could also do, if people want more of this, we could do purple worms, we could do that sort of thing.
That's true.
I need to talk about the giant toad though, because I think like that is something you totally brought to the table, that you were like, this, I want to do this giant toad mount. And I don't think I realized that you have like a frog thing, like a thing about frogs.
Look, sometimes you're just kind of sitting at your computer, and then all of a sudden, boom, obsession, and suddenly this one was frogs, right? So it's like, okay, cool, I like frogs now. But that kind of carried over into this project. But the frog was actually the second one of these that I designed for this article. Started off actually like, okay, what's going to be most successful? Okay, we have the warhorse. We're going to make sure the warhorse itself works as a mount. I mean, it already is a mount. We make it into a better mount. And then what else are they going to be able to get? Well, what about a frog? That has cool mobility options. It's got a tongue. That's fun. We'll go with that. And then we went to, flying horse. And then not a horse, actually just an owlbear or a basilisk. So, and it kind of went more ridiculous as we went along. So
yeah, it definitely did. And like you can see, right, in the art, the nightmare mount is mounted, of course, by a mummy, because that's what we get in our encounter, right? Which is a mummy riding a nightmare. And it's like, this article has everything I've ever wanted D&D to be in it. So you talked a little bit, right, about how you felt like we needed more robust mount rules. We needed cooler mounts in D&D. Talk to me about this encounter. What inspired the rally at Rashkar?
The rally at Rashkar. Well, you see, basically, this also went through a lot of iterations too, as we were trying to figure out the rules. Like, first it was, oh, you're being chased by purple worms. It's sort of an encounter I've used before. It's kind of fun, but it didn't quite fit where the article was going. But then we're like, okay, what about a wacky races sort of thing, where you get to race your mount along a dusty trail? And then it's like, okay, we need a place to put it in. So then Rashkar itself started to come into being. And we had this very cool setting. You have hobgoblins and orcs. They have their own history. And as we kept on iterating on it, some details got lost and got folded into the lore of Rashkar itself. In fact, one of the prizes at the end of the current version of the rally at Rashkar is sweet wine, which was one of the prizes at the end of the purple worm chase. In fact, I think one of the special cool abilities of the saddle you get at the end also has a bit of that purple worm flavor to it as well. But as we were going through it, it was too high in the sky. Like trying to do the minutia of a race, like round by round, it was too long. It was too like, I don't have the right word for it. It wasn't enough. But then we turned it into a sport. It was a little bit more action packed. It was going back and forth. It wasn't like from one end to the other. A sport made a lot more sense for figuring out, oh, hey, what if I don't want to go straight? What if I want to go left? And from there, it was like, okay, we have all the like bases. The pieces are in place. What are we going to do to tie that all in? We need something of an antagonist. And an idea of a paper-covered mummy that is on fire is incredible. So we have this mummy riding a nightmare. They cracks a whip. It's cool. It evokes a lot of really cool imagery, especially the art. The art just really nailed it. Like, wow. Yeah. And even beyond that, Matt, you wrote the prose for Churatha. I remember. And as I was reading, I'm like, hold on, let me get into character a little bit.
Yeah, that was I was inspired. I was literally inspired by what you wrote as I read what you wrote, and that's kind of the power of not having a publisher above us or anything. I was reading your submission and I was incredibly inspired by it, and I just felt like I saw this backstory that you were implying. I didn't even feel like I made that up. I felt like I was just detecting all of these tensions in history. And so I wrote a little chunk of fiction and said, here, I don't know if this helps or if this is useful. And it made it into the and it was cool because then you fucking one up me. You were like, that's nothing. I'm gonna actually act this out and do the VO, and there's music and stuff. And that's one of the most common questions we got was who did the voice, and it's you, right?
Yeah. I mean, at first it was like, okay, you wrote this thing. Let me see if I can understand what you were trying to say in your prose, and I actually kind of voiced it out. I do have this sort of fondness for westerns and cowboys and that sort of gritty tension of the era. That's my genre of choice. So I was kind of speaking it through, and it's like, oh no, wait, we can do this right. Let's get this recorded. Get James McLeod on the line. We'll do this. No, Kevin McLeod, that's his name. Yeah, that's right. And sent it over.
Yeah, and so we put it in the we put it in the product. That's I mentioned in the video that there are some Easter eggs, and that's one of them is you can actually hear Willy reading the prose that's in the product, which I think is like it was kind of an experiment. We would love to do more stuff like that in Arcadia, but again, like that's the freedom that we have in this context is if any of these people in this chat right now think this is a cool idea, it's going to go in the book. There's no reason not to. So I think that stuff is super cool.
Yeah, it was amazing.
We got a lot of really good questions in chat, by the way.
Let's hit them up.
Absolutely the most common question, because people I think are just super eager to use these rules. We got a bunch of people commenting on some version of Kyle Donovan's comment, which is that their interest in mounts went from going meh to abso-fucking-lutely. people like the brief of let's give people reasons to use the mount rules seems to be very successful. Pseudo Nick is asking, wait, where's the audio? Well, you got to find it. It's a link in the text. It's in there somewhere. You'll find it.
It does literally say play this audio clip. So it's not that hard to find.
It's not hidden per se. No, correct. Yeah. The most common question we got is what mounts didn't make the list, and I think the flip side of that is what mounts would you like to see next that we didn't get to put in the article.
Let's see. So when we did that, like, click, okay, this is what we want to do with this article. One of the ideas is like, could we give them a Displacer Beast? No, we can't do that. It wasn't allowed. It was illegal. So that's fine.
Not open, yeah.
But we can get that wild, I think. I definitely want to do aquatic mounts. I have a whole list of them. Construct, draconic mounts, just hitting all your general sort of genres there, as you will. But I also want to experiment more with locomotion options. Especially as I am finding my space in D&D design, one thing I really like to figure out is the dynamics of moving around and how we can innovate in that space a little bit more. So I want like something that, maybe this is a stretchy mount that can kind of like slither around corners but still has like its own space in combat. Or something that'll work with teleporting that isn't too busted. I mean, we just have to figure it out. But a lot of those ideas is what is going around in my head right now, finding the right creatures that might fit it, or if they don't exist, creating those creatures. They're all on the table.
See, here's how I know this content is successful, because as soon as we started talking about what other mounts would you like to see, everyone in chat just started going crazy with ideas like Kieran Lawless says ooze mounts. Taryn Moreau says, what about a miniature kraken? What about a seahorse mount, a hydra mount? What about medieval snail knights, which is Chris Lange, which is something you see in a lot of illuminated manuscripts. Can we get a moose? I don't see why not. Velociraptor mounts a gelatinous cube mount. Talk about locomotion. That would be an interesting challenge. So yeah, I think that you can see how people are. You can tell it's good content when it fires people's imaginations and it makes them want to create and makes them want to be kind of part of the process, right? That idea of when you discover that dungeon mastering is also a design space that you said earlier, like it's sort of impossible. I don't think I've really talked about this in my YouTube videos, but it's kind of impossible to be a dungeon master without becoming a proto game designer.
Yeah. In fact, I think. Oh my God, that'd be really cool.
Sorry. Yeah.
When we first did that first iteration of this article, I was trying to give sort of universal rules for how to do this yourself. I gave a couple of very loose, like, these are actions you can kind of put in there, but they were just improv, the action. In fact, I think you said that yourself. But once I gave examples and put those into the article itself, and people were creating their own mounts based off of those examples, that accomplished the same thing, but better. So, yeah.
We got it. That's something that's a big, it's a big point for me, is that it's our responsibility as developers and designers and authors to do as much work as possible for the dungeon master. And the more specific we get, the more we say, look, it's not just, a toad mount could have abilities like this. No, let's actually develop specific abilities for 5 or 6 mounts, because then that empowers the dungeon master to go make a whole bunch more. Now that they've seen how to do it, now they're free to go develop their own. And I think that is what that's the perfect scenario, right? Is that we give them tools, and then those tools are both useful and inspire them to make more tools of their own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway. And I'm sure people will maybe make their own even, right? Like on Reddit, we might see some mount stat blocks and stuff like that show up in the MCDM community.
We see a lot of retainers and action-oriented monsters, and that tells me that those designs are successful, right? So I think we're going to see a lot of new mounts in the Discord and on Reddit, because people are. I mean, I hate to single out one author, but I think the mounted combat article might be the most popular. I have literally seen dozens of people talking about each of the articles as being their favorite, but I do believe I detect the mounted combat one is the one that is inspiring the most people to do their own stuff. So we'll see what happens.
Well, hell yeah, I want to see that stuff.
It's a
Speaking
big
of
juicy
which, how do
article, and
people-
it's Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Actually, this is the question. I don't want to steal James's thunder, but we're going to talk about how people find you on social media and blah blah. I'll let James ask.
Oh yeah, so that was going to be my question: is where can we find you on social media? What projects do you have going on right now that you're super jazzed about that you want people to check out and that kind of thing?
Well, let's see. I'll give you my spiel. You can find me, the Willy Boo, at the Willy Boo, fun posting online and having a good time. At the moment, I don't have anything like ready to go. I'm working with Leon on their project. Once they're ready to announce that, that's going to be really cool. I'm mostly just doing layout at this point. But you know, there might be some more clown stuff. We'll get there, possibly. I have a couple of other things in my to-do spreadsheet, and depending on if we have the opportunity to do those things, we'll do them. But you can follow me on Twitter, usually at the Willy Boo, and you'll find out there.
Also, Jason Hasenauer, our art director, who was on the stream earlier, says, hey, when Willy comes on, make sure to mention that he did a bunch of cool sketches and call-outs for his mounts. And that a lot of those sketches were how we were the inspiration for the actual art that went into the book. So that's something we didn't talk about. That's super cool.
That's right.
If you get a chance, you should post those on Twitter.
Oh, you're gonna love these. I had to make sure that the owlbear was doing the like spreading its feathers out thing, so it was like a scared owl looking at a banana. I wanted that reference in there, and the owlbear that we got absolutely nails it and more. So
awesome.
Oh.
Yeah, I love the mount illustrations, and in fact, that was one of the things that inspires me about working here is that I often have to put on my author hat or my designer hat, and then my producer hat. And when I was talking to Jason, I was wearing my producer hat, and so I was like, "Well, presumably we'll illustrate like one of these, right?" And he's like, "Well, that's not cool. Why don't we illustrate like 4 of them?" Right? And I was like, oh, okay, sure. I don't know why. Like, I love the fact that like everybody else is like, well, what if we did more, right? What if we put more illustrations in here? And so that's kind of the brief, is that thanks to the number of people that back this, we're able to do stuff like that. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Willy, thank you so much for your article. I want to stay and talk to you about mounts. And one of the things that we said at the beginning of the process, which I think is something we also have to explore, is that mounts don't have to have 4 legs, right? And so like there's this idea of like a bugbear mount where you're just riding your friend who's a bugbear, that kind of thing.
Friends.
So
yep.
Well, that's the kind of Master Blaster archetype, right? Is that you've got the tiny character riding on the big character. Yeah,
that's the dream. If we can accomplish that, like with flying colors, then absolutely, I'll feel accomplished as a designer, and I can stop there.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Willy, thank you very much for joining us, Willy. I'm a super big fan of your work, and happy that you're included in this. And I'm just completely fucking delighted that everybody's going crazy over your article. That makes me happy.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Take care, all of you.
Awesome.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye, Willy.
Bye.
So I think that's it. I feel like, first of all, I mean, I hate to interrupt the flow of everything, but I feel like that this is the first time we've done anything like this on multi-stream with guests and getting questions from chat, and it seems like it kind of went off without a hitch. So that was, once again, thank you, Jerry. Also, thank you, James, for for being the co-host and kind of leading the charge and asking the questions. It also kind of shows the dynamic here, because you're the right person for this, because you source these articles. You're the one who knows these people and talks to these people. And I largely am heads down on other stuff. So thank you very much, James, for helping us develop. We talked about how Anna and Lars are kind of the unsung heroes behind the scenes, but you are really the architect of this. This is your work. And so the triumph of Arcadia is really the triumph of your endeavor, James. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you, because the same freedom that we gave to the authors, you really gave to me, right? Like I brought you a slate of articles and said, "What do you think?" And you said, I trust you. Here are my thoughts. Go forth, right? And so that's been very great. But it's also great to have your expertise, because there have been some places where we've gotten to some, hey, I'm not sure what to do here. What do you think about this? And you've been very helpful. And so I think working together, everything has really made this what it is. It's a giant team effort, and it's a team that I am super happy to be part of.
Yes, and a team that you joined full time in 15 or 16 days. So that'll be we're all looking forward to that. So yeah, that it's nice. Like, the dynamic between us is really good. I'm a big proponent of the division of labor, right? And knowing how to delegate, and because you are heads down in the development, and that frees me up to be kind of big picture. So when you're like, I don't know, do we do this or do we do that? I can take a step back and think about the goals of Arcadia, the brand of MCDM, the audience, what the audience wants, what the dungeon master wants, what's going to make it easy for them. And so between you, me, the author, you're not joking when you say it's a team effort. It was an enormous, like, Anna literally did not sleep. She pulled an all-nighter working to get Arcadia launched. And I didn't realize that. And when I found out about that, I felt bad, because that's not how it should be. So that's not going to happen again. Anyway, Chris Erickson said, can we talk about how it's doing? It's doing, I mean, as far as I can tell, it's doing really well. Like, it's exceeding our expectations enormously.
It really is. And people seem to really like it.
Yeah. So I don't know if we're going to do one of these for each issue. I would like to. I don't know why we wouldn't. But we got to make sure that also this doesn't become the Arcadia channel. That's not what we got to make sure there's running the game stuff, and we have more ambition for YouTube. So those of you who are here wondering where the next running the game video is, I have a script about halfway done. Hope to get it filmed and uploaded next week. We're going to absolutely continue making more videos for you folks. But Arcadia is a big deal for us, and we love it. And so it's up to you folks if you want to see more streams like this, where you get to interact with the MCDM team and we get to bring the authors on. I'm a huge proponent. Like, it's just a corollary to what James said earlier about, like, I want to empower people to do awesome stuff. So a big part of my management style, I hope, and the feedback I give is telling James, here's what I think, but you're in charge. It's your name as managing editor. It's up to you. You can take this feedback and do whatever you want with it, because I think that's going to get the best content. We want to feature the authors. We want you folks to know them. It's their byline. And so, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
I think
I think it's great.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just saying.
Else you want to talk about, James?
Yeah, I think this is all great, and I'm really excited, and people have been very cool about spreading the word about Arcadia too, which is greatly appreciated. So word of mouth is I think a big thing for MCDM on social media and stuff like that. So so thank you for doing that, as well as checking it out.
Jeb Gordon says, why is he the managing editor and not editor-in-chief? Well, that's a good question. I originally thought of myself as the editor-in-chief, because at the end of the day, the MC and MCDM is me. And so it's my name that goes on stuff. And it's my promise to you folks that we're going to put articles in Arcadia that are useful and actionable. We may also include other stuff, right? But as long as we're giving you 3 to 4 articles of useful, actionable content, then we're good. And it's, at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. So I think of myself as sort of the editor-in-chief, but you won't really find that is not a title that I claim in the magazine. James is the managing editor because he's literally responsible for managing these writers. It's his job to source them, and he's the one that works with them. So that's kind of the division of labor. And we saw that Mark Holmes was in chat. Mark Holmes uploaded a video, which I haven't got to see yet, in which he gushes about Arcadia. Thank you, Mark. Everybody go to Mark's channel and check out that video. Mark is a premier member of the D&D community online.
He's great. Thank you, Mark.
So also people wanted to know, this is a comment from Pesto, what James's role is going to be at the company just outside of Arcadia. And I mean, James wears a couple of hats, but his title is 5th edition line developer. And that means it's his responsibility to bring our 5th edition products to market. Right. And that means I might write an outline, for instance, or I might work with James on an outline and establish what is this product going to be. We have a list that I made that James contributed to of products that we would like to work on, not all of which are 5th edition, but many of them are. No spoilers. And so he and I work together on what should we be doing. Like, I don't think I'm spoiling anything when I say our next big project is going to be a monster book. A big monster book that has a lot, not only, but a lot of action-oriented monsters in it. And so it's going to be James's responsibility to basically do what he's done with Arcadia for all of our 5th edition stuff. In fact, it's James is, principally responsible for getting Kingdoms and Warfare across the finish line, because I'm basically focused now on Warfare, and James is finishing the development of all of the organization stuff. And James coordinated with a bunch of writers to get a bunch, because that was my plan all along, was I wanted to design Kingdoms and Warfare, but I didn't want to have to write the entire thing, because actually I think that working with other writers, you get better ideas, right? As you get the best of now 4 or 5 or 6 different writers' ideas instead of just mine. So that's James's job. James, do you feel like that's an accurate description? Is there anything I left out, or would you like to correct me on anything I said?
No, that sounds great. It's my dream job, so I'm glad to have it. Getting to work with cool people and getting to make awesome stuff for a great company, for a hobby that I really love, right? Like, it doesn't get any better than that. So, I'm very excited, and I'm very excited about Kingdoms of Warfare. I think there's some really cool stuff that people are going to love in there, and I'm also really excited about what's coming down the pike, because you know, even just monster book, like, holy moly, do we have ideas? And like, who knows? We did this mount thing in Arcadia. Will there be mounts in the monster book? Sure. I don't know.
No, there definitely should be. No, there absolutely should be. That's a no-brainer. Like, now that we've done this, we should definitely support it, because people like it. And that's a big, this is something I've learned when I used to work at Turtle Rock, is that our ownership over these things ends once you buy it. And at that point, it's yours. And how you use it determines what we do next. So when people respond to Arcadia and they say, man, I love the mounted combat armor, I want more mounts, it's like, okay, then we want to do that. We want to put more dope stuff in front of you folks. And I felt like there was something I was going to say. Oh, yeah. Like, this is kind of me giving a little personal anecdote, but like, Kingdoms and Warfare is definitely my brainchild. Right, this is something that I promised folks on YouTube years ago, before there was before we launched our first Kickstarter. I said I want to do Strongholds and Followers, and then I want to follow it up with Domain Management and Warfare. And because it's my brainchild, not everybody at MCDM gets to participate equally in it. Many of them are just kind of like waiting for me to drop the manuscript, right? And then they all spring into action. But a monster book is something everybody at the company can get excited about, and they can all contribute ideas to, and they can all, they can read all the monsters and get excited about it. So I am personally very excited for us to move on and do a monster book, just because at that point, I think all of MCDM gets to join in a way that they haven't been able to up until now.
Yeah, very collaborative. And I like when we got all our pitches, I remember we shared them with everybody, right? Like, we were like, hey, take a look at some of these pitches, and that was really fun to get feedback. I know Anna left a lot of feedback of like, I remember specifically on the Titan Heart, her saying, I want to be really big. And I was like, oh, well, that sort of sells this for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, is Lars and Anna and Jerry and now Nick and Grace and Jason, they're kind of the first, before the testers see things, we see it. And so all these people have all different relationships with the hobby, and many of us have been playing D&D for years. And so that reaction from, I just said vintage player. I'm about to describe myself as a vintage player as opposed to a veteran player, but I am also a vintage player. And new players, like players who are somewhat new to the hobby, like Anna and Lars, their reaction is super inspiring to us. In fact, to a certain extent, Arcadia came out of when we got a copy of the Art of D&D book, and I had it open at on one of our big conference tables at MCDM, and Anna walked over and was looking at the art, and she was just blown away by all this old art. She was like, this stuff is amazing. Why isn't there art like this in fantasy anymore? And I was like, oh, I always thought that was I thought it was my nostalgia, but she's a millennial. She's not nostalgic about any of that stuff. She was seeing these old magazine covers and this old classic TSR art and just thought it was awesome. And that started my thought process that led to us being here now. So anyway,
that's awesome.
I think
that's really cool.
I think that's it. Is there anything, James, that you want to talk about that we haven't covered?
No, I think that's it. I'm excited to you said join the full team full time. Honestly, it can't come quickly enough right now. I've been anticipating it for a couple months, and I'm like ready to go and get in there. So I'm shedding freelance projects left and right, so that I'll be ready to hit the ground running with y'all. Even though I'm already jogging.
Yeah, you've already done an enormous amount of work for us, and everybody is super excited to bring you on board. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. I will probably be on Twitch later today for a much more informal hangout. So those of you who have questions, I know a lot of you have questions about all sorts of other stuff at MCDM. And that's what Twitch is for. YouTube is for kind of more official, high profile stuff. Twitch is a lot more informal, and we can talk about basically anything you folks want. Thank you, everybody, for the support. Thanks to all the authors, all the artists that helped contribute to this. We really want to do more and more Arcadia, and we want to put more dope stuff in front of you folks so that you're inspired and you have great content. That's literally all we want to do.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, everybody.